For those of you who might be wondering or who are new, I am not the dynamic, youthful, vacationing Pastor Bill Falk. Instead, I am the fill-in. So, yeah, maybe I'm what Bill will look like in 40 years or something like that. I have no idea. But I have the opportunity to share this time with you, and it is a delight for me. I'm glad to see you here. And so what I'd like to do is share with you something that is the product of my own interaction with the Word and with a number of people that I've been working with. In the introduction that you'll find in your bulletin, what I'm talking about is leadership and people who are great for the right reasons. And that was where I was going this morning as I was getting started. But I realized that perhaps the more appropriate introduction would be talking about our world today. It's a crazy place. There are things happening nobody expected a week ago or 3 or 4 days ago. There are some of us who have family members who are involved, and there are others of us whose lives themselves are somewhat entangled. And we look around us, and the times they are a-changing. And it is a world that is in tumult. There are many people who are breeding chaos, and we need to find some answers, especially within the Christian community, as to how do we respond? How in the world do we live? Now, please understand that this is not unique. This has been happening throughout the ages. We just happen to have our own unique version of it. But even so, I think God calls us to live for Him and understand what that means here and now and today. And so what I'd like to do is bring to you a study that really, like I said, grew out of work that I was doing. I have a prison ministry that I do. And this really kind of grew out of that, but also out of my own interests. And so what we're going to do is take a good look at some aspects of the life of Joseph, but also some things that I went back to, I sort of redug out, and I ferreted, and hopefully I found a couple of things that are worthwhile sharing with you. To begin with, I'm just going to cover Genesis 40 and 41 briefly, because most of us are familiar with it, and for those that are not, it comes across pretty quickly. Genesis 40 talks about this young man, Joseph, who is on the outs with his 11 brothers, or on the outs at least with 10 of them, and they, through a series of events, end up selling him off as a slave, and he is taken down to Egypt, ends up being sold to a guy named Potiphar, and he ultimately becomes the manager of Potiphar's plantation. Then he has a very famous interaction with Potiphar's wife. He doesn't do anything wrong, but she does. And she screams and essentially gets her husband to put him into prison. And so he spends really an indeterminate time in prison. We're not quite sure how much time he was the plantation manager and how much time he was in prison, but we know he was there. And the total time that he spent there was over 30 years. So here's a kid, not over 30 years, about 13 years. He was taken out at 17, and he finally was able to leave when he was around 30. So he spent about 13 years as a slave and an indeterminate time in prison. And then we all know the story. Here's this prisoner who is taken. The Pharaoh has dreams that he can't understand. Nobody knows how to interpret them. One of the guys pops up and says, I know somebody who had actually known Joseph out of prison. And so Joseph is brought forth. He interprets the dreams. Excuse me. And Pharaoh then moves him into the top job in Egypt. He is now the ruler over the whole show. He gets to ride the chariot. I, as a little aside, I've often wondered what he did as he passed by Potiphar's wife on the side. Did he give her a special little wave or a wink or keep her in suspense? We'll talk later or anything like that. But, I mean, that's just a whole different deal. There it was. There's the story. Like I said, we pretty much all know it. But then I began to dig deeper, and I realized it was not as simple as the kind of rags to riches story that we take it. I know how easy it is to say that. Here's a guy who walked with God and ultimately became the great man, and that as we walk with God, we too can become great. Well, it sounds good, but it's a lot more complicated than that when you dig deeper. And so where I want to start, really, that's the first point. Boom! Boy, there's a message, isn't it? Just blew through it. Let's go to point number 2, because here, I think, is where we really begin to dig more deeply. And now where we're going to go down to is Genesis 50. And this is the story when he is interacting with his brothers after the death of his father. You see, he had brought his entire family out of Canaan into Egypt in order to escape a desperate famine. They probably would have died, or certainly would have been deeply affected had they stayed in Canaan. And they have lived in the lap of prosperity, and Joseph is still the head guy. And finally, the time comes when the father dies, and those brothers who had treated him so terribly came before him. I'll pick up with verse 14. And after he buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph should bear a grudge against us and pay us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him?" Good question. You see, the problem is a lot of times one of the things that we're most fearful of is justice. Sometimes the terrible thing on the horizon is that I get what I deserve. I don't know about you. There are a few things back that I have hopefully, buried or whatever. But along the way, if they'd caught up with me or decided to simply give me what I should have gotten, it would have been a pretty difficult thing. And so what they're talking about is something that really is not unfair. What they're literally fearing is that they would get their just rebuke. And so what they do is they decide, so they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father charged before he died." Well, that's interesting because we can see that Joseph was there when the father died. And one would think that of all the people that he would tell something, Joseph would be the guy. But just between us, I don't think that this is the accurate sharing of what the dad actually said. I think this is them making something up and hoping they can get away with it. And this is what they say. "Your father charged before he died, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin. For they did you wrong. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.'" Maybe that'll work. And what would your response be? Just pause for a second. You got a Bible, you might have read ahead, but just think about it. Well, wouldn't you want to keep on tenterhooks just a little time, just leave them hanging a little bit? Let me think about it a minute, No. It says, and Joseph wept when they spoke to him. What? It says, what I think he is realizing is they don't understand. They truly don't understand. I think one of the most frustrating things in the Christian community is the people who don't get it. They just don't understand. Look what he says. His brothers came and fell down before him, said, "Behold, we're your servants. Anything we can do to make up for what we've done." And Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. I'm not God." See, we have a hard time with that. I understand retribution. I understand getting back for what I've done. I understand justice. And I think far too often we like to stand in God's place and deal it out. And the first thing Joseph is saying is, he weeps and he says, don't be afraid. He says, am I in God's place? And then he says that fascinating phrase, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about this present result and to preserve many people alive. He said, don't you get it? God used the very bad things that you did to bring about this phenomenally good result. In fact, this is kind of like the Romans 8:28 of the Old Testament. God works all things together for good, according to his plans and his purposes for those who love him. And then he says, look, so therefore, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones, so be comforted, and and he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Look, he is comforting them. These are the guys that should be crying and weeping, and I'm so sorry. I mean, come on, drag it out a little more. I really want to make sure you are. And I want to see that sorrow. I want to see how bad you feel after all you did to me. Not even a little bit. Brothers, understand something. That is not the nature of God. When they were expecting justice, what they got was grace. And even beyond that, they were embraced by the very one that they had harmed. Do you realize that? When the day comes and we are embraced by those nail-pierced hands, we will look into the face of the one that we sent to the cross. Now, that sounds good, and I really appreciate it. In fact, that is literally a picture of Jesus. But then I had a problem. I'm like that. I have this brain that just doesn't let things go. Some people wish I would, including my wife at times, but she goes, come on, just let it go. If we have a Sunday school class, and we do this constantly. Mark, when are we going to finish the chapter? I'm not done yet. I'm still thinking it. So anyhow, and the problem is this. I know the story about Joseph, prison to palace, but I don't know how he got here. How in the world? Because this isn't like, well, God was good and, look, hey, I'm not going to hold against you. This is profound. This is really working things through. This is laying aside his own right to take something out against his brothers. Where in the world did that come from? So, again, I was kind of struggling through this and wondering. And now what I'd like to do, and it's funny, I even have the chair here just to remind me. Because where I go back to is prison. I mean, really prison. And we were in the Spanish class. I won't do this in Spanish for your benefit. But we were in Spanish class, and my back prior to surgery was so bad that I spent most of my time in the chair. And we were talking about Joseph. And we were talking about what had happened. And so what I'd like to do if you'll join me, I'd like to go to that very place where we were talking. So I want to kind of walk you back through the class. I'm not going to stay here, don't worry, I'll just do it a little bit. But you know what I found? It sort of gets your head out of the phone for a minute. So, maybe I can manage that. So if you will, turn with me back. This is kind of a weird way to study, right? Go to the end and jump back. But turn with me back to the story in Genesis. And it picks up in chapter 40. And this is when Joseph is in prison. And remember, he's been there a while. And certainly, he's probably been there for a few years. He's worked his way up to the head man all over again. So he's been there long enough to really feel it. And I need to tell you something else. Yeah, I'm going to get out of the chair. I'm going to tell you something else. Most of us don't understand prison. You see, prison is a place of isolation, and prison is a place of helplessness. You don't demand. At best, you request. And you are out there all by yourself. If you want to reach out to your family, if you want to reach out to a friend, you just hope they write you. Certainly up to very recently. You had no way of getting out there. And that's where Joseph was. Joseph was locked up. He was inside the prison. He had no way to lobby for anything. No way to deal with these things. Talking to the men there, how long you been in? 5 years. How much longer? I don't know. At least 5. That's your environment. That's where you're living. You live in that box. And you pray, you hope that people on the outside will write. Some of them have nobody to write. They're just on their own. So what you offer is what they get. So Joseph is in prison. And the first thing, and what I'd like to draw you back to is that familiar story of his co-prisoners. And his co-prisoners turn out to be men of real power. They were sent down there, and Joseph was specifically told to take care of them. And so what I'm going to do is pick up in verse 9 and talk about one of those prisoners. Verse 9. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, behold, there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. And as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. So the idea is this man is sharing a dream with him. He had been literally the right-hand man to Pharaoh. And when I say that, I mean that literally. In other words, when a drink was to be given to Pharaoh, he was the man that got the drink and tasted it. Because one of the ways that you would change rulers was to put something in the drink that would eliminate the current one. So it was an interesting job, I guess, in some respects. If he did his job right, I guess every now and then, if the guy did his job right, he would drop dead. But, I mean, other than that, it was a pretty good place. And by the same token, a lot of times these were the men of great power. These were the men who were advising the Pharaoh, literally their right-hand men. And so here's this man, and he is offering up his dream. Here's this guy, and another man there with the prison with him is the baker. And the baker has a similar kind of job, other than the fact that his is more secondhand. He would not be the one who actually served the Pharaoh, but he would be the one that assured that the food was coming to him properly. And these men had somehow offended Pharaoh, possibly because somebody else had dropped dead eating the Pharaoh's food. And so they're in the prison waiting for whatever's going to happen. And in the course of this time, the cupbearer has a dream. And this is what it is. He says, I'm here in my dream. Here's a vine that drops down in front of me. Pharaoh's cup is in my hand. I took the grapes, squeezed them into the cup, and I put them into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph then says, now, he's been called upon, and he says, in fact, if you look back at verse 8, they said to him, we have had a dream, both of these men. And Joseph said, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please. So he turns to God, and he hears the dream, and then he says, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head, and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to the former custom when you were his cupbearer. Okay, now I'm going to drop down. I'm just going to include this because it's not in the outline, but just so you know, it's interesting. The baker had a similar dream. The only thing with him was he had bread, and there are 3 baskets, and the bird were eating from the baskets, and Joseph said, you will also have your head lifted up. There was one slight difference. The one head would be lifted up in honor, and the other one would be lifted up literally. So that was kind of what was going. But notice in verse 14, because I think that's a key verse. He has just interpreted the dream. He's just said 3 days from now, he says, only keep me in mind when it goes well with you. And please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house. I mean, the man really was desperate. You ever been there? You ever ask God in the most difficult, desperate times, I need this. If I don't get this grade, I won't get the job. I won't pass the grade. I won't get the scholarship. If I don't get this job, I don't think I can feed my family. If this operation isn't a success, I don't know what's going to happen. You see, what we are talking about is somebody who has been placed in a circumstance who has little or no control, really no control over the outcome. And suddenly it looks like a window is opened. What am I going to do? And he grabs it. Now, I want you to notice something. He doesn't say, God, give me wisdom. God told me. He just realizes this guy is going to be standing before the king in 3 days. And I want him, here I have done this incredible service, and I want him to help me in one little thing, and that is plead my case. Notice, for I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. That's true. That's fair. That's right. Now, I'm going to make the situation a little more complicated because you are being unjustly treated and you are justly asking for a way out. That's fair. That's right. And you're desperate. What in the world do you do? And I'm talking to these men in prison because they're in similar circumstances in many ways. And he notices, I was kidnapped. He says, I've done nothing wrong. Now, I want to pause for just a moment. And this is a little aside, just for a thought. What would have happened if it had worked? What would have happened if 3 or 4 days later, Joseph had been released? He probably would have gone home. End of Joseph, end of story. See, we don't know because that's not what happened. So where I want to take you now is down to, pick up 28, verse, I want to take you down to verse 23. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Now, I was in a unique situation to present this because I had men in front of me who really understood. And here's the situation I'll present to you. Put yourself in their place. You are in here, and you've got a number of years ahead of you, potentially. And your lawyer comes in and says, tomorrow, I have an appointment with the governor, and I believe that your case is one that he is really going to respond to well. And so I just want you to know that. So you be aware of that fact. I will be right there. And you say, you know I should be out of here. Yep. You know they need me out there. Oh, yes, I hear that. Okay. And I said, what do you do? Well, you pack your bags. You get your stuff and you decide what you want to take with you, right? And you talk to a couple of guys around you. Hey, short time, man. I'm about to leave. Okay. And pull things together. Do I want the toothbrush? Nah, we'll just leave it behind. Whatever. And you sit down, and the next morning you wait for that call, and nothing happens. So you go, well, maybe he just didn't see him today. So the next day, what do? You sit down, and nothing happens. And a week goes by. And a month goes by, and a year goes by. What is God's response? What is God saying? Notice, it happened at the end of 2 full years. As we would say. I'm going to say it out. First, I'll say it the way I would normally say it, and then I'll use the abbreviation. Oh my God. OMG. Man, you got to be kidding. 2 years? But let's look what happened. I'm not going to go through the details of the dream, but I'm going to take you to the place of what happened. And I'm going to pick up in verse 28. Actually, if we pick up in 25. Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has told the Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 good cows are 7 years. The 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one and the same. 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years. 7 lean ears scorched by the west wind shall be given 7 years of famine. So the ugly cows ate the good cows. The ugly corn ate the good corn. And he's saying, what you got is, you got 7 years worth of bumper crops and then 7 years of nothing. And he says, it's as I've spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he's about to do. Behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming in all the land of Egypt, and after them 7 years of famine will come, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and famine will ravage the land. So the abundance will be unknown in the land because of the subsequent famine, for it will be very severe. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means the matter is determined by God. Notice, and God will bring it about. Now, let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise, and let him take over the land, and let him set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him exact 1/5 of the produce of the land in the 7 years of abundance. Let them gather all the food in those good years that are coming, store up the grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and let them guard it. And let the food become as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine, which will occur in the land of Egypt, so the land may not perish during the famine. What is Joseph doing? He not only is giving him the interpretation, he's giving him the plan. He says, not only is that what's going to happen, this is what you need to do. But notice how he starts out. He says, verse 33, let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise. You know, it seems to me that the guy who interpreted the cupbearer's dream and said, talk to Pharaoh about me. Where is he now? He's standing in front of Pharaoh. I would expect one of 2 things at least. Number one, at a bare minimum, let me out. Right? He spent 2 years gnawing on the tablecloth. I don't know what he was doing. And not only that, here is a guy with years of managerial experience at Potiphar's place. He was over the farms and everything else that was there, with more years of administrative experience at the prison. If he were a truly bold man, he would say, Pharaoh, I demand. You are looking at somebody who can run this show for you. And he doesn't say that. In effect, what he's saying is, go look for the man. And I think in his mind, he was getting ready to go back to prison. And then Pharaoh says, 37, the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is a divine spirit? Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has informed you of all this, there's no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house according to your command. All my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I've set you over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it into Joseph's hand and clothed him in garments of fine linen and put the gold necklace around his neck. Boom. What I said in the introduction, and I'm going to draw one thing out of it, is there's a famous phrase that says power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. There are very few men in history who have had that kind of power and actually used it well. You can look at a lot of people today as well that are devastating. And because, I mean, Genghis Khan killed, what, 40 million people? And yet there are a few. Lincoln, humble man. Harry Truman, I don't know if you realize it, when he finished office, he went back home to his little old place in Missouri. Ronald Reagan retired to his ranch and set posts and rode his horse. How in the world, and so, what really made me curious is, how do you get there? And the key in Joseph's life, see, that's the transition that we needed to see. So here's what I was struggling through with the prisoners. Here's what we were trying to figure out. How do you get there? And the answer is very simple. As a friend of mine once said, it is the most simple thing in the world and the most difficult. You trust God. Please listen carefully. My first question to you is this: is God real? Because not all of us think that. I mean, he's kind of real. He's out there. There's this power. I'm talking about the God of the Bible. Is he real? The second thing that I'm going to ask you is this: where is he in your life right now? If he's real, how much of your life is really wound up in him, wrapped up in him? He's there. Because see, that's the thing is, God gave us choices all over the place. Most everything we do are choices. And I can choose to integrate God into what I'm doing, or I can sort of do my own thing. I think that when God asked the cupbearer, get me out of this place, he was on his own. He said, man, this is the moment. The man's going to be there. Get me out. Sounded great. And certainly wasn't ungodly. But God said no. And God said no in a very significant way. God not only said no, I believe, and this is why I was telling the men, He extinguished Joseph's hope. Would you hear that? Joseph hoped that his plan would work, and God squashed it. Why? Because if it had happened, Joseph would have never known whose idea it was. Why? Well, I mean, I asked the guy. He came through. Oh? I think that what happened was literally Joseph came to the point that when he was standing before Pharaoh, he was saying this: I have learned to trust God so completely, and I am willing to understand that He will take care of me to the point that I will lay this before you, and then whatever happens, I will embrace. You hear that? Whatever happens, send me back to prison. Okay, Lord. What happened was what he never, ever expected. So the question is, how could he handle the power that was about to be given to him? Because absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. And the reason is, it wasn't his power. He didn't own it. He just managed it. When it's God's, you get to play, but He's the man, he's the boss. He's in charge. He's working it through. And as we unroll the events of our life, we can look at each and everything that takes place in that way. Here's what I'm saying. You get the job, you don't get the job. Lord, I put it into your hands. This is my desire, but I fully trust you for the outcome. I get the grade, I don't get the grade. I get the scholarship, I don't get the scholarship. I do this, I do that, whatever. Father, it is in your hands, and I will trust you for the results. For one thing, that is how in the New Testament it says, Peter, Casting all your anxiety upon him because he cares for you. What? You mean we think it's cancer? Or it is cancer? We hope this new treatment works? The treatment didn't work? Trust him? Yeah. Why? Remember the question about God, who is he? Well, here's the most important question of all. How much is he in charge of? And how much is he in charge of in my life? First question is simple. Everything. Absolutely everything. If you go back to the Old Testament, there was talks about a huge army camped outside the walls of Jerusalem. And in one night, some disease wiped out like 275,000 soldiers, and not one person in Jerusalem was affected. You know what that means? God moved the very molecules of the disease throughout the Syrian camp, and nobody in Jerusalem was touched. Who gets the flu? Well, whoever God chooses. Oh, wait a second, aren't you over managing and getting crazy about it? No, it's okay with me. God, I don't want the flu, but I mean, you've got a plan and purpose in the whole thing. That doesn't mean I don't plan. It doesn't mean I don't put the thing on the table. It doesn't mean I don't work at making it happen. It means it's not mine. These guys in prison, he has you there for a purpose right now in what he's doing. These painful things that you've experienced and are now experiencing have a purpose in the hands of a loving God. And you can either embrace them and cooperate and grow through it, or you can fight them and allow him to bring you back to the same class. It took Joseph, wonderful, incredible, talented Joseph, 2 full years of disappointment to work it out. So if you struggle with it a bit, I don't blame you a bit. I can remember a period of time over 9 months when the bank decided they wanted my house more than I did. And they sent letters to that effect. And each month they had given me an offer that I chose to accept, and then it turns out it might have been not have been what it sounded like up front. It was a very confusing time those days. So I battled with them. And like I said, I would get my regular letter saying, not, we're going to foreclose. It was, we're selling your house. That's a completely different experience, believe me. Okay, Lord. Now, allow me to say something. I was a wreck. I was frantic. I was fighting with everything that I had. I was not a calm, cool, collected cucumber. But I learned. God did things through that I never could. In fact, nobody could explain. I was told on several occasions, I'm sorry, you can't do that. And I had to respond, I already have. I don't know, except that God worked it out. And the next time a crisis came up, I was a little better. And the next time after that, it was a little better. Trust is a process. It's a learning process. But it means that when you arrive, you hold it lightly. Power. President Truman. President today, next door neighbor tomorrow. Okay? Because God is still in it. And God is going to use each and every part of what we do. So let me suggest to you that as I look at the Word and I look at what's going on, this came up almost accidentally. Like I'm saying, it was one of those things where I didn't even realize we were going there. I just was answering some questions with these men, and we were going through this, and I suddenly realized, I don't know what happened during those 2 years. I just know that Joseph apparently went from get me out to choose a guy. And I'm backing into it. Now, please note, I'm not going, and in the Hebrew it says, and if you do a careful analysis of the underlying grammatic structure, this is just sit down and think about it. Work it through. Answer the questions. And to me, That's the obvious answer. God took him from, I need out, to choose your man. And when he got to choose your man, God said, it's you. So when I sit down and I try to work through the key to Genesis, I think the key to Genesis comes down at the very end. God meant it for good. You meant it for evil. You tried to do evil things to me, and God took all those evil things and turned them into something incredibly good to your benefit and to the benefit of thousands upon thousands of people. And my challenge, I think, goes back to, am I going to embrace that fear and allow it to consume me constantly? Is anxiety going to be the story of my life? Do I get overproduction of whatever it is that happens when you do that? Or am I going to slow down and say, wait a second, Lord, it is truly in your hands. I will do what I can. I will give it to you, and I will trust you. And ultimately, that's the line. If you're willing to wait on God's will, you will win in the best possible way. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you because we get the story of somebody who looks like an overwhelmingly good, automatically good guy. He's almost like, man, almost like a cartoon until we dig deeper. I believe that is somebody who cried in prison and screamed in prison and complained in prison and kicked the walls and ultimately came to the point where he said, wait a second. If God is in it, he'll take care of it. And to tell you the truth, I need to work that through myself. And maybe you're there too. Let me suggest you join me on the journey. Learning to trust him is really what takes the sting out of so much in life. He is good. And even what looks bad, even when they meant it for bad, he will use that for good if I'm willing to trust him. Help us, Lord, this day. In Jesus' name.